I'm from the European Environmental Bureau, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. So before we get started, just a few practical notes. So first, as I said, the session is recorded, so please turn off your cameras if you do not want to be recorded. Secondly, please keep your microphones off, and if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. We'll address them during the discussion. And finally, and my colleague Marlinda will give more details when it comes to her, but if you have any initiatives, so landscape features, please add it to the short survey that will be put in the chat. So yeah, you'll find the link in the chat. Now, a few words about the project behind today's event. So the LAFERIA project is on the reintroduction point of view as well. It looks at a number of different areas. It looks at existing initiatives, the policies that shape them, the business models that could make them economically attractive, etc. And the aim is to identify practical pathways to bring back landscape features in a way that makes both ecological and economic sense. Today's webinar, it has three main goals. The first one is for us to provide you with an overview of the project, which only started this year, and its first insights that we've already gained. The second is to invite you to join the LAFERIA community. This is a place where the different stakeholders, the aim is to bring them together to co-create solutions, to stay up to date with findings, with the project's findings. But also we really hope for it to be a place where basically peers can connect across country, across governance levels, to discuss amongst, and finally, hope initiatives. So this is what we'll have this morning. So if you could please share the slides. Thank you. And put them in full screen. Okay, can you put them in full screen first? Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, sorry. I'm going to go back. I went too far back. My apologies. Okay, so in terms of the agenda today, we'll begin with an overview of the project from Francisco Moreira. Then we'll have, sorry, I don't know why it keeps changing. My apologies. Then we'll have Melinda Koopmans, who will explain how you can contribute to mapping existing landscape features initiatives across Europe. This will be followed by Evelyn Underwood, who will set the scene in the EU policy context. Finally, and then we will have Guy Pierre, who will explore how we can generate real impact by developing a shared vision. And finally, Angela Lomba will guide us through a collaborative breakout discussion to start generating some solutions together. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to hand over to Francisco Moreira for the project overview.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So my name is Francisco Moreira. I am the coordinator of this project. I'm not sure if I'm able to move the slides myself, but if not, please, Nikolai, go back to the title slide, if possible. I'm afraid of clicking somewhere else and destroying the thing. So thank you for your interest in attending this event, this half morning. So LAFERIA is the acronym of a project about landscape features reintroduction in intensive agricultural land, and the objective is to provide in the next 10 to 15 minutes maximum an overview of what we propose to do and what we are doing. So next slide, please. So in a nutshell, LAFERIA was the response to a call from Horizon Europe about reintroducing landscape features in intensive agricultural areas. So, and highlight the intensive, because this was a the policy perspective of the Horizon program. The project will last until 2028. It started last January, and we are a consortium of 13 institutions that you can see on the table there from 7 countries. Next slide, please. So what are landscape features? They are small fragments of natural or semi-natural vegetation in agricultural landscapes, and which provide support for biodiversity and ecosystem services. And you see that there are 4 major groups, what we call woody landscape features, grassy, wet, and stony. And next slide, please. So what is the context? I will be really brief here because Evelyn will present a little bit more on this. So in a nutshell, agricultural intensification led to the loss of these landscape features in farmland. And both the EU biodiversity strategy and the nature restoration regulation aim to restore these features. The issue is that the mapping of landscape feature is incomplete, as well as the understanding of the potential benefits, both in terms of environment, farm production, economic benefits that can arise. And in addition, there is a need to understand what are the barriers to reintroduce landscape features in farmland, particularly in intensive farmland. Next slide, please. So the overall objective of LAFERIA is to identify the key factors that can promote the reintroduction of landscape features where needed in intensive agricultural land in Europe, and to develop strategies to overcome the barriers to achieving this objective of reaching at least 10% of the agricultural areas under high diversity landscape features. And for that, we propose to attain 4 specific objectives that you can see on the right-hand side. The first is to quantify what is there, coverage and connectivity. The second is to assess costs and benefits. The third is about identifying the drivers and challenges, one of the cores of the project. And lastly, with the information we gather, to develop strategies and as well business models that take into account these features in the farm and in the land. Next, please. So what do we expect to attain with this project? This is a short summary of the main expected impacts. We expect to provide new information on landscape feature coverage across different agricultural systems in Europe. Then we aim to assess and summarize what information is there on the potential of these landscape features for biodiversity, ecosystem services, and their role as connectivity, ecological connectivity across the landscape. We also expect to provide new information on the impacts, both the benefits, but as well as the costs on farm economy and business models, a better understanding of the perceptions and drivers and barriers of landscape feature introduction, to provide recommendations to policy and market tools, and finally to co-develop a vision for rural areas where landscape features are an important component, and based on this, to set the foundations for what could be demonstration projects. Next slide, please. We will have a focus on case studies. So LAFERIA will have a total of 7 case studies spread across Europe, where we go into the details, in particular, the details of understanding the local socioeconomic context, understanding perceptions, understanding what can make a farm or a landowner be willing to accept or not reintroducing or maintaining landscape feature on his or her farm. Next, please. So in addition to case studies, we do count with the participation of anyone who is interested. We aim to learn, to mutually learn from each other. And so for those in this call, in this meeting, one thing that we would like you to do is to engage in our stakeholder community. So this is a group of experts, of interested people that are committed to knowledge exchange, to shared learning. And there is in the LAFERIA webpage, there is that link to the stakeholder community where you can register and be informed and more actively participate in our activities. Next slide, please. So our work plan is based on 7 building blocks, let's call it like this. The central building block is, in fact, the box in gray in the middle of the figure about stakeholder engagement, co-creation, social transformation. And then we have 6 major research building blocks. The first one's on the left-hand side about assessing the status of landscape features, then assessing private and public benefits and costs, another important building block. Then on the right-hand side in reddish, learning from existing initiatives, uh, and then understand the drivers and challenges for landscape feature introduction. And the green, the last building block, it's about learning and scaling up solutions. So how can we help setting strategies to maintain and reintroduce landscape features, mainly in intensive farmland, but not only, of course. So next slide. In the next slides, I will provide a very short overview of 5 of these building blocks for you to have an idea. So the first building block is to learn about the current status. And what we'll do is that we are implementing what we call an agricultural systems approach. So the idea is to identify which agricultural systems have which types of landscape features and what is the current cover of these landscape features. Then we this quantify the coverage, and lastly, to assess the contributions of these features for ecological connectivity. So for what you call the green and blue infrastructure. On the right-hand side, you can see an image, a draft image of what the type of land of agricultural systems that we will consider, at least for a Europe level approach. And so we aim to have a spatially explicit mapping that would allow us to quantify coverage using different sources of information across these different systems. Next slide, please. Then the second big building block is about assessing private and public benefits, where we will try to synthesize information on the benefits for biodiversity, first bullet point. The second bullet point about what are the monetary and social benefits linked to ecosystem services. Then as well at farm level, third bullet point, what are the benefits and costs for production, for yields, for the farm economy? And in the end, we aim to model the contribution of these features to multifunctionality in the context of farmland as a social ecological system. Next, please. A third building block is about learning from what is happening already. And so we make an inventory of instruments and mechanisms that could support farmers' adoption, number one. Second, we are interested in mapping and reviewing what initiatives are there, and this is a second objective for this meeting, and Marlinde will just after me will focus on this and a request for your help. And lastly, to make an in-depth analysis of selected initiatives and try to learn if they were successful or if they failed, and try to understand why did that happen, both the successes and the failures. Next slide, please. Then the building block on drivers and challenges is at the core of the objectives of the project. So we mostly at the case study region, we want to analyze the political economic context. We want to learn about the views and perceptions of people on the ground, of land managers and landowners. And with that, to try to model what is the decision-making processes for being willing or not to keep and reintroduce these features. And lastly, but not least, to learn in particular with initiatives that try to use these features in their business models. That would be the ideal situation to promote landscape features. Next, please. Whoops. Yes, that one. So to close the project, this is the final building block where we try to, first of all, to network and cooperate towards a longer term and larger scale vision. Guy will tackle a little bit of this already today with those of you participating here. Then setting the priorities for the introduction. So where should be the priority locations? What type of landscape features should be the priority in different regions of Europe, so that we attain the 10% landscape features and contributing to achieving the target of the 3 billion trees. Okay. So with that, in addition to setting priorities, to develop strategies for using landscape features and planting trees, and lastly, to develop a toolkit recommendations for policy. So how landscape features can be an active component of the Green Deal. So that's the final aim after these 4 years of the project. And I think that was my last slide as a introductory overview of what is the LAFERIA project, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Before moving on to Marlinda, because I saw a couple of people join since we started, please, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to put them in the chat and we will pick them up. Marlinda, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francesco, for the introduction of the project. I'm Marlinde Koopmans. I work for ILVO, Institute of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food in Belgium. And I will now shortly explain to you why we are collecting the initiatives, how we are doing it. I will share some examples to inspire you, and also give a short overview of the initiatives we have collected so far, and most importantly, show how you can also contribute to this mapping exercise. Let's see if I can. Okay, can you go to the next slide? I don't see here a button to do it. Okay, so why are we mapping these initiatives? As Francesco already introduced, we want to learn from these initiatives in order to get an understanding of their success and failure. And at the same time, we also want to use them already. We want to map the initiatives to develop an online database, so it becomes also a practical tool when people would like to start or want to reintroduce landscape features in a certain region, that they can look up and look for examples. So it is also a source of inspiration. For that, in the future, we will develop an online database on our website. It's still in the early phase, but we will inform you once it's there. And also, after having a first collection of initiatives, we will study some of them more in depth. So to identify possible pathways to more diversified business models, and formulate strategies to introduce landscape features. And for that, we will study some initiatives in depth. And at the same time, some initiatives will also be a source of inspiration and part of the workshops we will organize in the different case study regions across the project, as Francesco just showed. So yeah, there's different goals for the mapping. Next slide, please. So what type of initiatives are we actually looking for? we are looking for initiatives that are located within Europe, that have a connection to agriculture areas and also obviously address landscape futures. We have, as you saw, structured all the different type of landscape futures in 4 types: the woody, grassy, wet, and stony landscape futures. And their idea is that there should be an example we can learn from. And in that sense, it can be very different types of initiatives. It can be an example of a business model, as that's one of the objectives within our project, identify new business models organized by a farmer, but it can also be a label. It can be a cooperation of different farmers, or it can be a cooperation of different organizations, all aiming to reintroduce or maintain landscape futures in a certain region. Next slide, please. So how are we mapping the initiatives in this first phase? So we have developed a survey, of which should appear in the chat soon also, but that's for after the webinar, of course. But we are collecting the initiatives in a survey, and this survey we have spread first across our own network, so the networks of the partners. And also we have shared it on LinkedIn. You might have seen this already, and to our other social network channels. So it's an open collection to get as many initiatives as possible. Of course, we will not probably have all of them, but we do have already quite a number to get a good representation of all the different types of initiatives that are out there. Next slide, please. I will now shortly explain a bit what is in the survey, so you know a little bit what's in there, so it's more easy for you if you know initiative to enter them. So the survey is we try to keep it short. It has 10 mostly closed questions. Next slide, please. And the first thing we ask is then that it should the name of the initiatives, the country it's located in, and if you know a little bit the region, it can also help us. You can indicate it. Next slide. We are asking for the type of agriculture area it's connected to. So is it arable land, grassland, and sometimes it's also different types of land, of course. The next slide. And then we ask you to indicate the type of landscape features that are connected, that it's connected to, that they aim to introduce. So there can be different ones. You can tick one or both. Next slide, please. And then we have some more in-depth questions. So we ask the main focus of the initiative. Is it a creation of new landscape features, or is it the maintenance of landscape features? The sources of funding, is it public funding, private funding, or a combination? And also we have one open question to identify, to learn a bit more on the context. Why is it interesting to learn about this initiative? So why should it be an example to inspire others? And we collect some basic links to existing websites, and if we the link to a contact person. Next slide, please. So this is the process I've explained to you now is the part of the first step in this research process. So we're collecting the initiatives, and we're about to start with the more in-depth step from this study. So the whole study will mean we first collect initiatives and get very basic information. From that, we make a selection of about 80 to 100 initiatives. We will each contact and try to get a better comprehensive picture of the initiatives, and these comprehensive pictures will be put in the database. So there we will collect a description of how it contributes actually to this reintroduction, get a basic understanding on the governance, who started it, the political context, and of course get the first idea on the success and failures. This is called the latest review, which is a second step. And finally, we will go more in-depth and we'll have a very in-depth analysis of an even more smaller group, so about 30 initiatives, and there we try to fully understand why the initiatives fail or are successful, understand the business models or the financial mechanisms, and that way identify these pathways, as I said before. So it's a stepwise approach, and if your entrance of the initiatives will help us to get a very diverse perspective, and also creates the possibility to make valuable comparisons between different countries. Next slide, please. So we have started this collection just before the summer. And we are now up to, well, we are about 250 initiatives we have collected already. The majority is in the western region of Europe. The northern region has also 22% of the initiatives are located in the northern region. It seems to be a bit more challenging to find initiatives in the eastern region of Europe and in the southern region. So if you have examples in these two regions, we would be very happy if you could share them with us. The next slide, please. If we look at the type of agriculture land use that is addressed within the different initiatives, we see a dominant use of the cropland and arable land, often in combination or of grassland. Those are the predominant type of areas that are addressed with the reintroduction of landscape features, but the others are also tackled. So there's also some initiatives on permanent crops, and quite some initiatives say that they address all the initiatives. So then it's more of a, for example, the Biotope Verbund in Germany. It has objective to increase biodiversity, and then a lot of cases you address all landscape features. Next slide, please. And if we look at the type of initiatives that we have collected up till now, we see that the majority is addressing woody landscape features. So that's about hedges, that's about trees in the fields. In combination often with a grassy landscape features. But there's also quite some initiatives that address wet landscape features, and stony is also represented. Next slide, please. If we split them over the different regions, it's interesting to see that in the western region, the majority is tackling the woody landscape features and the grassy, while in the northern region, there's a majority of wet landscape features. Of course, this is the result of our collection. It doesn't say that there are more initiatives in the northern region with wet landscape features. This is just a reflection of the initiatives we have collected so far. And yeah, if you say, no, there's actually a lot of those in one of those regions, please share them with us, so then this graph will change. Next slide, please. Just as an example, I will share two examples. The initiatives we have been collecting are very diverse, as you could have expected. So there are organizations, for example, the Network Agroforestry in the Netherlands, or its business model, or their farmers. It started on different levels. And here you see, for example, the funding grassland conservation in Transylvania, where they work with these biodiversity credits. And they aim to support the small-scale farmers to fund environmental friendly land management. It's a project, actually, but a long-term project. So that's very interesting from this case. And it aims to attract private money to pay for the biodiversity. And in that sense, an interesting example of a funding. And what we see is we see several of these credit type of examples in the different countries. So it will be very interesting to compare those and to see in what context, how it works. Next slide, please. Another example from a total different perspective in the Netherlands, there is the monitoring of landscape changes. So by actually monitoring the hedges in the provinces, on the left you see the provinces in the Netherlands, the hedges, the waterways and the roads, you get an idea about what is there at the moment, and it allows you also to think, okay, we need more of this and that. And even if you map them, you draw maps, you can see, oh, there's missing links, and that can help to have a focused approach to develop landscape features. So this is a typical regional approach we see quite often in the Netherlands, but also in Germany. This approach is prevalent. And they aim, it is used to inform policy development. So it's a whole different initiative to have reintroduction of landscape features, but also valid in our case. So these two examples I showed to inspire you that we try to address this from different angles. Next slide, please. I hope this has inspired you to share with us your examples you think of. So we have here the QR code. you can take a photo, but the link will also be shared in the chat. And if you have other questions or you think you're not sure that this is a good example, please just send us an email and we can get in touch. Or if you have other questions, please let us know. We're looking forward to your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marlinda. Seeing as we're a little bit ahead of time, if there's any questions, burning questions for Marlinda that someone wants to ask, feel free now. Otherwise, as before, you can put it in the chat. Don't hesitate to raise your hand if you have any question or want further details. The link to the survey has been put in the chat just now, so definitely feel free to fill it in. Thank you very much. I don't see any raised hands, so I assume your presentation was crystal clear, Marlinda.
Thank you.
So then I think that means that we will move on to Evelyn.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Evelyn Underwood from the Institute for European Environmental Policy, and I will give you a quick introduction to what we will be looking at the policy side, and then invite you to join us for the next steps of that work. Can I please have my first slide? Can I ask if everybody can see the first slide? Okay. So our focus is really on trying to elucidate the policy drivers that can incentivize this reintroduction, and also what policy barriers are currently in place that are preventing initiatives. So next slide, please. I will briefly list you the key policies that we have decided to focus on in our initial work. I'm assuming from the audience we have that most of you are pretty familiar with this, so I'm going to do this quite quickly. I will give you a bit more details on some of them in a minute. But as Francisca mentioned, in 2020, there was the EU Biodiversity Strategy and the Farm to Fork Strategy established this aspirational target to reinstate high diversity landscape features on 10% of farmland in the EU, and also the target to plant 3 billion trees was there as well. And then that resulted in the EU Nature Restoration Regulation that was agreed last year. And this sets now a legal requirement on governments to set up and report on an indicator of high diversity landscape features on farmland from a baseline to the years set in the regulation. Then the Common Agricultural Policy is obviously key here, and it sets the standards for the receipt of agricultural payments, including the retention of landscape features, and various ways in which to support farmers for the reintroduction of these features. Then we consider the water legislation, the Water Framework Directive and the Nitrates Directive as an important indirect driver, particularly for requiring the use of natural water retention measures and the installation of riparian zones. For soil, we have no EU-wide legal requirements, but there are national laws that mandate the protection of certain types of landscape features to protect soil and protect against landslides. And for landscape protection also, there are many variants of national laws that protect certain features of the landscape for their cultural, historical, or nature value. And there are also certain instruments that can be used at the regional and local governance level, such as tree protection orders. Next slide, please. So to give you a bit more detail on what the CAP is doing, so as I mentioned, it sets these good agricultural and environmental standards on all CAP payments. And the current standard number 8 specifies the retention of landscape features. This has been in place since 2005 in various iterations, but there are some key things to point out. First is that member states choose which landscape features they include, so it does not protect everything. It covers only the landscape features that are on the eligible agricultural area, in the fields and on the field edges, but it doesn't include tracks, roads, fields not receiving CAP payments, or areas around farm buildings. So there are a lot of landscape features on farmland that are not covered by this standard. And in the last 2 years, there has been this drive for simplification, and it has resulted in the removal of the requirement for a non-productive area on arable land. This was the successor to the ecological focus area of the greening in the previous CAP. And this change has taken place either last year or this year. And member states were encouraged, but not obliged, to replace it with additional support schemes for farmers. So really, this is has been shown to be an important feature that has protected from the additional loss of landscape features. It has slowed the loss on farmland across the EU, but it is not a driver for the reinstatement. So the financial support from the CAP is absolutely key here. And current CAP plans offer 42 eco schemes and 59 agri-environment climate schemes that support landscape features, either maintenance or reintroduction or both. And most member states will offer investment support, so capital support, but by the nature of the CAP reporting, it's not possible to quantify this in the CAP plans. But I want to point out that it's extremely important also to offer opportunities for farmers to cooperate at the landscape scale, because the reintroduction of features in denuded agricultural landscapes often has knock-on effects for neighbours. It requires careful planning also at the farm level. And therefore here it's also really important to have a strong advisory service. So we will be looking at that too. Next slide, please. So for the EU Nature Restoration Regulation, in Article 11.2, this sets an indicator for agricultural land with high diversity landscape features. And the requirement is to put in place measures to achieve an increasing trend at the national level. What the regulation means by high diversity landscape features is that they are not treated with chemicals and fertilizers, so free from pesticide and fertilizer application. And there are no management interventions, or at any rate, without specific cases, during the bird breeding season and other sensitive periods for nature. It covers all that the CAP covers, or can cover, and in addition, in the field, it covers fallow and flower mixes, and also patches of agroforestry, orchards and small woods. So those two go beyond the CAP GAIAC 8. It's measured at the EU level by a combination of data from the Lucas survey and EU survey data on fallow land. And in addition, member states can develop their own methods for tracking the fallow agroforestry and orchards landscape features. And the intention is to have this indicator then established in the CAP as an impact indicator. Next slide, please. On the water, soil and landscape protection side, as I said, we're looking at the water legislation, but here the drivers are really much more indirect, because these directives are not explicit in their requirement for these features. So it's really something that member states should be choosing to promote in order to fulfill the objectives of the directives. So there are many differences at national and regional and river basin levels about how this is done. Similarly, for soil, the requirements are set in various different types of national legal protections, sometimes even regional protections. In some cases, terraces are legally protected, or other features. In Portugal, there's a national ecological network, which is legally binding. I'm not sure if Spain actually legally protects terraces, but there is legal protection elsewhere. And national nature conservation laws also play a role here. An example is Germany, that has legal protection for certain habitat features. Local authorities can use tree protection orders for individual trees, and there are also other types of landscape protection. Now, many of these instruments are actually not much used on active agricultural land. So we will be digging into this more deeply as we develop this work. Next slide, please. So what will we do in LAFERIA? Currently, we are working on an overview report of what the policies that I've just described are doing, and why they may not be having the effect that they could be having to achieve the objectives of the policies. We will then do a deeper dive at the case study level, and also at the level of the initiatives that you heard about just before, to really look at the details of the policy implementation and the gaps, and whether there's a coherent approach or whether there are barriers. And we will feed all that information then into the LAFERIA policy recommendations and science policy events. So for today, I would be very interested to hear from you and your views on what you think the key policy drivers are for the reintroduction of landscape features in intensive agricultural areas. So I look forward to the discussions in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Just double checking. No, we don't have any questions so far, but as Evelyn has said, this is one of the questions we'll be discussing in the 2 breakout sessions that we will have after this last presentation by Guy. So Guy, go ahead.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you very much for being with us and for listening to the LAFERIA presentation. In this presentation, what I would like to talk about is the question of why are we actually doing that? Why is the EU investing so much in a project only about landscape features? And this is because we want to reach a certain impact of what we're doing. That requires also developing a vision or shared vision, as I will explain in a few seconds. Let's see if I can move the slides by myself. It seems that I do. So what do we actually want to achieve? As you've heard just now from Evelyn, there is a very challenging task of reaching 10% landscape features as a target in the EU. Admittedly, though, in some parts of the EU, this is really hard to reach, such as in Northwestern Europe. For instance, in the state of Brandenburg in Germany, in a paper that was published just recently by Lin Shan et al., 2025, she showed that in 95%, almost 95% of the state of Brandenburg, there's a lot less than 10%, even 4%. And this means that the task of reaching 10% is going to be quite challenging for member states in some regions. However, this is not all. We need to remember that we have other parts of Europe and other regions where we have a lot more than 10%. And we want to go beyond this 10% in some regions and not only work in intensive agricultural areas, because landscape features and their losses might be very important also in other areas. And for ecological reasons, some papers and studies show that we need 15% or even more, depending on what we are preserving and what we are restoring. So in this project, we are trying to get a really good overview of what do we need and where, and not only focus on 10% as a number that simply needs to be reached. We also need to make sure that we are not backsliding. In some areas, we still see the losses of landscape features. Only in the urban areas, there is in Article 8 of the Nature Restoration Regulation a requirement not to have a net loss of green spaces. So we need to ensure that there's more ambition to make sure that we are protecting and improving the management of those landscape features that are already there and not losing anything that is to be protected and restored. We also want to make sure that this is done in a cost-effective way or a cost-efficient way, meaning that we ensure the restoration of the right landscape features in the right places and the right way. For instance, not in all places we might need to plant trees. It could be that they can be restored by themselves and letting ecosystems simply restore by themselves through the process of succession in some areas. More importantly, and I'll come back to this point very soon, we want to ensure that landscape features also bring benefits to those restoring them and participating in this process. These are all very challenging tasks and ambitions, so let's see how we are meeting them. Let's take the example of hedges as a typical case where, as ecologists, we might like them very much. Here's an example of a hedge that was restored within a community-based conservation, agricultural conservation area in Leipzig. Leipzig is now one of the 7 case studies of this project. And here we can see a very nice hedge full of species, also delivering some benefits to the fields nearby. And this is in the case of Kola, as I said, a solidarity protected agricultural area. So now the problem is that many farmers would not necessarily agree with ecologists about the benefits that they see there. And this is partly because the costs are not proportional to the benefits. First of all, you have the costs of investment, which according to Lea Kolb, for an analysis that she did for Thuringia and looking at the literature, this can range from 5,000 to 15,000 euros per hectare. And this is quite a lot of money that somebody needs to invest. Then the other issue is opportunity costs, because of course, once you establish these hedges, at least on the area where they stand, normally about 10 meters of vegetation, you cannot produce anymore. So per year, you will have an opportunity cost of about 1,000 euros. And then additionally, because they're protected by law and because we want to put controls to make sure that they're managed well, there's also transaction costs of their bureaucracy, the work that people need to be putting into it, the fact that they cannot go with a tractor, etc., etc. So there are many different costs to those participating, whereas, for instance, in the state of Thuringia, the benefits are pretty limited because the investment costs would be paid only to 80 or 90% of these initial costs. That means that for participating farmer, this is actually a loss rather than a benefit. And we need to put these straight and make sure that those people that invest in that do that with the right incentives. For instance, in Saxony, they would pay more than the initial costs. And this is very important and also leads to restoration efforts. However, this is not only the work of farmers to do. There are many different tasks and people that are involved in that. And so we need to make sure that from the local to the regional level, we're generating benefits to those that are actually taking part in that, which often are the landowners rather than the farmers who make the decisions about what will happen in their land. We need to also communicate the benefits, but also communicating the costs or the disservices, because it's not only about joyful birds and butterflies flying there, but also admitting that in some cases there are some costs or losses that need to be compensated for. That also means that those who participate need to be visible to the entire world and not only working with the losses locally, but also seeing any benefits, for instance, from market or from visibility for political, social reasons, but also economic ones. The other task, as Francisco was mentioning, and one that is going to be very central in one of the work packages, the one that we are working on, is on scaling up the solutions. If we want to see more and more farmers or regions or municipalities taking this challenge and investing in the restoration landscape features, we need to set the priorities right. We need to find how to prioritize landscape feature restoration and where, in which regions, by whom. We need to develop recommendations across systems, across scales and regions. So in different countries, we'll have the solutions that fit to their environment. And we need to develop and test alternative strategies. This is partly why the case studies have been selected in a way that is complementary to each other, where in one case, it might be a company For instance, in Portugal, that is irrigating huge areas. In other cases, such as in Leipzig, it's a municipality that decided to allocate point system for the restoration of landscape features and other actions on the field. And so we need to alternatively look at different strategies that can lead to the scaling up. But most importantly, we need to create an enabling environment for this restoration. And that means that we will need to engage in science policy interactions from the regional and national level up to the EU level to make sure that we foster solutions, also demand solutions. This requires putting this again in the broader context. As Evelyn was mentioning earlier, landscape features are part of the Green Deal. And the Green Deal includes a set of strategies, which you can see in the upper part in yellow, and a set of legal instruments and directives that already exist, such as the Bird and Habitat Directives, which are there for a long time, but will be soon opened, and we need to be aware of that. We have the Water Framework Directive, which is very important for maintaining and restoring areas that are impacting water quality. And recently, we finally have the adoption of the Nature Restoration Law, which will definitely be very instrumental and will require member states to invest not only in agricultural areas in Article 11, but also in other areas. And we should not forget that, for instance, some agricultural areas might occur within urban areas or affecting water areas or water courses, and therefore relevant also for other articles. We will also have to work with the sustainable use regulation, or the fact that it does not exist because it was rejected by the Commission and the Parliament recently. And we do not know what will happen in the near future with the Sustainable Food Systems Framework, which we know that the Commission has started developing already several years ago. To our knowledge, it was ready for publication, but we do not know whether and when will it be published. Finally, and most importantly, we have the Common Agricultural Policy, which is the main policy and the main source of budgets affecting what is happening in agricultural areas. This means that the coherence between the CAP and the Nature Restoration Regulation will be extremely instrumental. And if member states fail to see the opportunity of doing the right things within the CAP, then it will be much harder to work on the restoration of landscape features. Whereas if member states and the Commission will see the opportunities there and the win-wins, then hopefully there will be more cooperation and more adoption by farmers. Unfortunately, the Common Agricultural Policy proposal beyond 2027, which was laid by the Commission recently on the table, proposes, for instance, moving away from standards, ring-fencing direct payments, but not necessarily ring-fencing any instrument for environmental protection, meaning that it might be very difficult to work in the near future, and we'll have to identify the path, nevertheless, of making sure that landscape features can operate as part of the Green Deal. So how do we maximize impacts? First of all, we will be trying to proactively engage stakeholders, engage any of you, engage in strategic cooperation with projects, with existing initiatives and organizations. We know that a lot of people and organizations have been trying to do that for a long time. And so we will need to be working across the value chain to maximize the impacts. We will experiment on alternative paths and solutions, gather lessons, and define what are the enabling conditions that are necessary. And of course, go to policymakers and try to ensure that they secure them. And we will engage with the help of Pensoft and others in dissemination and communication to ensure that we clarify what are the costs and benefits, but also we will need to rectify some misconceptions about losses. There will be still a lot of questions to answer, such as who needs to take an action? Is it the farmers, the landowners? Maybe it's the municipality if we want to restore landscape features along roads. Who are the partners to work with? It could range from farmers and farm organizations through NGOs, policymakers, but also interested citizens, businesses, restaurants, retailers, whoever wants to work with us. This requires a shared vision of what do we want to achieve and why. When we developed the proposal for this project, we had the vision, and we still have the vision, that the introduction of landscape features is central in a transition towards nature-based, biodiversity-friendly, and climate-resilient agricultural production in Europe. We perceive that landscape features are playing a very important role in viable rural landscapes. And that means that if you want to restore vitality of these landscapes, you also need to restore landscape features. Whether you agree or not, this is a question that we would like to discuss with you. So we have to achieve a certain change in mindset from a burden to an insurance, and from a situation where many people might not be participating to the situation where people can see the benefits and take them up. So if this vision is speaking to you, we will be very keen in the discussion to discuss simply with you and learn from you what is your vision of the restoration of landscape feature. And with the plurality of visions, we hope to find some consensus areas where we can work together with as many organizations and people as possible towards achieving that goal. With that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Guy. So I think now I will leave it to Angela to introduce the collaborative breakout discussion groups.
So good morning, and thank you, Guy, for setting the tone for these collaborative breakouts. So during this session, we want, as Guy was saying, to have this collaborative discussion to generate solutions together. And let me see if I can change my screen. Okay. And for that, we propose to split ourselves into breakout groups. The groups will be allocated randomly, so each of you will be put in a group with us, and then we will discuss for roughly 20 minutes. We will get back to the main room and then wrap up. In terms of what we are going to discuss, and keeping in mind what Guy was saying, that was a nice and very straightforward, lively way of initiating this discussion. So besides what also Marlene was saying and others, so we would like to hear from you if you know other initiatives that are going on landscape feature reintroduction, knowing that some of them may not be so accessible in terms of our research and mapping. We would like also to hear about which conditions would be required to provide and to allow landscape feature reintroduction work. And picking again what Guy was saying, what would be the vision or your vision to integrate landscape features as part of the viable rural areas? So this is something that we need to build together so that landscape features could be part of the system. And we know that this goal will be ambitious, and this is something that we need to bring to our discussions. So I think it's time to split, I think. So it will be roughly 20 minutes. You will be automatically assigned. So see you in 20 minutes.
I would propose that we stop recording at this stage so that people can feel free to converse.
Yes, great. And I just wanted to close this by thank you all for the great discussions and contributions today. I hope you learned something. And before we close, I'd again like to encourage everyone to register to the LAFERIA community so we can keep those discussions going. It'll also get you to receive all the updates, and we can continue this co-creation process together. And again, I think we've said it 6 or 7. If you know of any initiatives, please do not hesitate to fill in the survey. And thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all the participants for your time, and have a great day.